Welcome to CBC News Toronto. I'm Dwight Drummond.
I'm Anne-Marie Medawake. They were high school friends from London, Ontario. Both were killed in a terror attack in Algeria.
An attack that they helped carry out. A CBC News special investigation discovered their identities. Neil Colksole now with the new details we've learned about these men in the last few hours.
In the brutal layers of this kind of bloodshed, it is hard to imagine anyone could plan and execute such an attack. This one took the life of 37 hostages in Algeria. Even harder to imagine that it was planned and perpetrated in part by at least 2 young Canadian men. The last place anyone really remembers those 2 men is here at London, Ontario's South Secondary School.
This was, as I said, a real surprise and not on the radar.
It seems Ali Medlej and Chris Katsuribas made an effort not to ever be on the radar. Even at high school, where so many teens are focused on making memories, the pair were friends, and few others remember much about them.
I remember he hung out with Chris, and, just other kids from school. It's just very normal high school,
Other friends tell CBC News Chris started to change. He dropped out of high school in grade 11 and raised Greek Orthodox. He suddenly converted to Islam. This woman was concerned about being identified, but says she knew both boys and their families well.
They were both really good kids. So I don't know what happened, but it's kind of a scary world out there.
CBC News has learned the pair left London for Western Canada looking for work. Documents obtained by the CBC show Medlej was charged with shoplifting soon after arriving. Both men were later thrown out of their apartment, accused by their former landlady of destroying the home. They later returned to London. How they were radicalized and why is still a mystery. The 2 were on the CSIS radar, but the spy agency stopped tracking them. CSIS is not commenting. CBC News has learned RCMP were aware of the pair too, at least as of June 2012. The local Muslim community is responding to the news, saying it rejects all radical elements.
Terrorism has no religious identity. Terrorism exists all over the world.
The school board here echoes the sentiment that we heard at that mosque today as well, Anne-Marie and Dwight, that they feel this isn't an issue of one school, one community, one city. They feel it's a concern that is developing all around the world. They're certainly worried about it here now, and they feel that they admit to us that it feels closer than ever to home, that fear for them here. Reporting live in London, I'm Neil Colksole.
Neil, thank you. Now, very few government officials wanted to comment on this story today. However, Immigration Minister Jason Kenney says Canada isn't losing the battle against terrorism.
Canada is not immune to this phenomenon of domestic radicalization of people growing up in Canada who are born with every advantage in this country, turning to forms of violent extremism.
And Canadians being lured into violent extremism is the #1 concern for Canada's top security officials.
The GTA has seen a number of examples, including the most infamous case involving the Toronto 18.
And our John Lancaster has been tracking the story of homegrown radicals and tells us about our security situation.
They were called the Toronto 18, busted after plotting to bomb targets in Toronto and Ottawa. Most were eventually convicted, but it turns out they're not the only radicalized Canadians.
I don't think we grasp how serious it is.
Mubin Sheikh is the secret agent who infiltrated the terror cell. He says increasingly, disillusioned Canadians are being radicalized online, led to believe they have a duty.
That is the one idea that really is prominent across the board. That is the major narrative, that there's a war on Islam and we need to defend our religion, our faith from outside attack.
Do not think that the martyrs are dead.
U of T student Mohammed Elmi Ibrahim was one of them. He died in Africa shortly after making this martyrs video. Friends came to mourn with his family. He had vanished from his Toronto home one day in 2009. At least 7 others who worshipped at this Islamic center in the city's north end are also missing. Security officials estimate 60 Canadians have left to wage jihad.
Well, there's no one simple, quick solution.
And this national security official warned us back in 2011 that radicalization was becoming the single biggest threat to the country.
The problem is that if they're prepared to act on it, then a very small number of people can cause a great deal of harm to Canadians.
This is the promise of al-Mansour.
Omar Hamami is a former Toronto resident turned jihadist. His online videos urge others to join him.
Radicals are whispering their ears.
And it's worked. This former extremist, now living in Toronto, says marginalized and racialized youth are targeted by terror groups. He made this controversial plea last year.
Help us before they use us. Employ us before they employ us. The ball is in your court, federal government. Wake up before blood is soaked in the streets of Toronto.
And that is exactly what security officials are concerned about. Highly radicalized, well-trained Canadians returning to this country and possibly prepared to strike.
And John, what are those security officials doing to stop this?
Well, in some cases, Dwight CSIS, for instance, has managed to intervene in some cases where young people in Toronto and across Canada, for that matter, have been radicalized and seemingly prepared to go off and wage jihad. They've actually visited their parents, let the parents know what's happened that they didn't know about. In one case last year, they actually arrested a Toronto area guy at Pearson Airport. His bags were packed and ready to go off. But families, too, are very concerned about this. In fact, some of them have told us they're so concerned that quietly their sons and daughters are being radicalized. They've even started to take away their passports so they can't get out of the country.
All right, John, thanks for bringing that to us.
Okay.
And on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto, you will find detailed breakdown on the history of these two London, Ontario men. As well, we're going to look back at some of the other cases where Canadians have become involved in extremist groups.